Welcome back to La Pausa. This is episode 6, our Pints and Punditry podcast here at the Pitchside Pub. And today I want to talk about the FA Cup. We had some replays yesterday, and the FA Cup is, we're now in full swing after the turn of the new year. The ongoing domestic cup tournament in England. And I want to go on record. I love the FA Cup. I think it's unique. The whole domestic cup concept is unique to European football. We don't have it here in the States, and what we do have is not run the right way. And I just love it. I think it's fantastic. However, I think it needs some tweaking. It is running the risk of falling down the ladder of importance in terms of all the different competitions that these clubs play in. And it needs some upgrading. It needs some more updating than upgrading, but it needs some adjustments. And I have some solutions that I think would work, and I want to talk about those today. But I want your opinion. I would love to get your thoughts on what you think about the FA Cup in its current iteration and what you think about the things I'm going to suggest today. So get in the comment section. If you're watching this on YouTube, I would love to hear your thoughts on what you would do to change the FA Cup. What do you think about our suggestions? Get in that comment section. If you're following on YouTube, or if you're watching on YouTube, I should say, make sure you hit that subscribe button for me. If you're listening on Spotify, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Follow us so you always know when new episodes come out. Mondays and Thursdays is what we're generally aiming for. And, of course, follow us on Twitter at Pitchside Pub because you can always interact with us on there. Give us your thoughts. Give me topics you want to hear me talk about, discussion points, anything. Hit us up on Twitter, Pitchside Pub. So the FA Cup. Great competition, old competition, historic competition, but we got to make a few changes. And I'm going to start first with, what was bringing this to my front of mind today, which was the replays we saw yesterday. Mainly I was watching the Chelsea-Aston Villa game, which Chelsea dominated, and now everybody's saying, is Chelsea back? No, it's not that simple. That's a whole different conversation. However, I don't think those games should have had to be played. I think one of the changes that needs to be made is the elimination of replays. The calendar is too congested to be adding full-on extra games, and every team complains about this. Every manager complains about this. There's too many games in general. So you got to figure out a way to solve these games and determine a winner on the day of the match without doing a full replay. And remember, it used to be, if the second replay went to a draw, you did a third replay and a fourth replay and a fifth replay. At no point did it ever go to penalty kicks. And we have obviously worked away from that over the years, and I think the time has come to eliminate the extra replay, go into extra time, play the two 15-minute periods. I personally don't like penalties. I think it's like ending a baseball game with a home run derby, or ending a football game with a Hail Mary contest. I don't like it. But obviously it's commonplace, so if that's the way you want to go after two 15-minute periods of extra time, that's fine. I would just keep adding extra time, 15 minutes at a time till you get a winner. But that's just my personal preference. If you want to go to penalties, that's fine. But you got to come up with a winner on that day. Even all the extra time is not the same as playing an entire other game, a week later. So to me, that's the first thing you got to do is make the tournament less arduous. And stop adding games because you want the best players to play in the tournament. And that's one of the issues that's hurting the FA Cup now is some players or some teams don't always play their best players. So that's the first one I would eliminate. I think hand in hand with that, you got to expand the benches, right? You got to allow clubs to have extra substitutes. Maybe you make extra substitutes. Maybe you just give more versatility on the bench. If you're going into extra time, you can add substitutes as you get to extra time. Each extra time period gets another substitute. There's all sorts of ways to get creative with it, but that allows it to be less of a physical burden on the players, thus making the clubs more likely to play their best 11, at least to start the game. Because you can always sub them off if it's getting to be too much in a midweek setting because you got a Premier League game in 3 days or whatever the case is. So give them more flexibility, keeps players healthy. The big clubs would love this. You got to remember in the FA Cup, we got everything from big clubs to small clubs, right? You got the 5th, 6th, 7th tier. You got the Manchester Cities and Uniteds and Chelseas of the world. So you got to try and accommodate everybody here. The big clubs would love this because they're significantly deeper. right? So if you add more substitutes, Manchester City gets to bring on Jack Grealish, right? Whereas, Newport County's bringing on some guy making 30 grand a year. So it's a massive benefit to the big clubs, which is why they'd be okay with it, and they're the ones you really need the sign-off from. So that would be the second thing I would change, is I would expand the benches. So you've got more, and these two things go hand in hand, right? You stop with the replays, you expand the benches, and this helps take the physical burden off of the players, which is a key point of focus that needs to be emphasized. Just in the overall game, the congested schedule, fixtures, everything needs to be focused on keeping these players healthy, because there has been a rash of injuries this season. So many teams are saying, well, if we didn't have this injury, well, this is why. Too many games, too many injuries. You got to do some things to accommodate that. Third, and this is the big one for me. This is the big change I would make that I think a lot of people will probably have a problem with, particularly the English folks who love the tradition and the way things have always been done. And I know I'm the American here, so I'm going to be told I don't get it. If you have a disagreement with any of these opinions, I want to hear it, but please come at me with something more than you're American, you don't understand. That's not going to fly. Give me a reason why this can't be done, because my next change is the big one. I would like to eliminate the draw. I would like to eliminate the random draw of who's going to play who in the next round and where the game's going to be played. So these next two changes go hand in hand. I would like to see a seeding system put in place. There are a lot of different ways you can do it. You can seed the teams based on how they finished in the FA Cup last year, or how they finished in the English pyramid based on the regular season standings from the Premier League and the Championship, League 1, League 2, etc. You could do it based on that. You could find a cutoff in the current season and say, okay, as of December 1st, we're going to go based on this year's standings, and this is your position. I don't really care how you determine the seeding. I have an opinion, but I wouldn't die on that hill. But I think it should be seeded. When these clubs enter the tournament, right? Even the big clubs that enter in round 3, they get a seeding from 1 to 92, or however many are left at that point, right? And the best team plays the worst team, and the second best team plays the second worst team, and so on and so forth. There's nothing worse than seeing two big clubs play each other in round 3, and one of them gets knocked out when they really should have had a chance to make a deep run. We saw that with Chelsea and Aston Villa yesterday. Aston Villa, now, they didn't play well, so they were probably going to lose to a lot of teams yesterday, but they played okay in the first leg, and they might have beaten a smaller club and been able to advance. Tottenham Manchester City is a great example. Tottenham got a really unfortunate draw. They drew Man City, and Tottenham had a chance to make a run. They played well against City, but they get knocked out, and it's early. It's unfortunate, and it's what I don't like is when any tournament structure, and this goes down from Pee Wee football or Little League baseball to billion-dollar soccer organizations. I don't like when the framework of a tournament does not facilitate getting a result that demonstrates who played the best, right? Or who was the best team. That's the whole point of a competition, to see who's the best. Well, Tottenham is better than a lot of the teams that are left, but they had the unfortunate luck to have Manchester City's name pulled out of a hat right after them. Well, that doesn't tell me anything. They deserve better than that, so I don't like the luck element of it. So I would have a seeding system. And I don't think I would reseed every round, because then if you are a small club that knocks off a giant and you move up, now you got to face another giant. That's not fair. But when the big clubs enter the tournament in round 3, you seed them, you rank them from 1 to however many are in there, and they play, your best plays worst and next plays next, and then you move up. And it's an actual bracket, much like America's March Madness for college basketball. And this accomplishes a couple of things. One, the big clubs will be in favor of this too, because they get to play the smaller clubs. So there's less likely of getting a bad draw and getting knocked out early. You will see larger clubs advance further into the tournament. This benefits them. However, the majesty of the FA Cup, the brilliance of the FA Cup, the thing that makes it legendary and makes it so great to watch, the wonderful narrative, is the giant killing, right? The small clubs that go in and beat one of the big clubs. That's what makes it so brilliant. We have to facilitate it so that happens more often. What's even worse than seeing two big clubs knock each other out is two small clubs knock each other out. You get a third, a League One club versus a National League club in round 3, and one of them gets knocked out, and that's a real shame. You would like to see them both have a chance to do some giant killing. And if we facilitate a structure that allows for more of those matchups, we will get more of those amazing results. Yes, the big clubs are going to win more often than not, but this gives us more opportunities for a giant killing scenario, and I'm all for that because that's what makes the tournament so great. Now, we got to give the small clubs something. We don't want to design the whole thing to be just the biggest clubs playing each other at the end unless they've done what they need to do. And that's the argument I'm making is it's not that I want all the big clubs to win. No, I love the Cinderella story. That's the beauty of it. But if the big clubs go in and do what they need to do and play well, they deserve to win. That's what didn't happen to Tottenham. They went in, they played well against Manchester City, they still lost. They're out. That's unfortunate. And it's not that it's unfortunate that they're out, but it's unfortunate that they are out because of a name pulled out of a hat. That doesn't tell us anything. But we want to give these small clubs a chance to compete. And so the other change I would make is that these games, the location of the game, who the home team is, should also not be determined by the draw out of a hat. It should always be the lower seed, up until the semifinals, at which point it goes to Wembley and is played on a neutral field. But up to that point, it should always be at the lower seeded home stadium for a couple reasons. One, if we're going to go David and Goliath matchup, we got to give David a rock, right? You got to give them a fighting chance to win these games. And no matter what you say, I don't care how much money Manchester United is worth, when they have to go to Newport County and get ready in that crap little dressing room and go play on a below average field under crummy lights on a Tuesday, that's tough. That's tough. Right? So you're giving them the better draw, but you're gonna make them earn it. And that's the brilliance of it, is watching, a $1 billion club go play on this tiny little 8,000 person stadium. And that's the brilliance of the FA Cup. So we need more of that. Whether that game is at Old Trafford or in Newport County should not be determined by a draw out of a hat. That is absolutely ludicrous that is how that is done. And so I want to facilitate it so that these small clubs get to do the hosting. Additionally, that's revenue. That's revenue, and that's what they need. All of this needs to help fund the smaller clubs. They get 8,000 people for that game. They get TV exposure. They get the gate. They get jersey sales. Manchester City's coming to town, or Manchester United's coming to town. That's the beauty of it. So they need the financial help as well. So they should get to host these games every single time, and that gives them a fighting chance. It also makes them more willing to sign up for this. Yeah, okay, we're probably going to get drubbed by Manchester United, but hey, we get a lot of money out of it. And two, you're telling me there's a chance. And all we want is a chance, right? A chip in a chair. We just want a seat at the table. We just want a chance to compete and make some glory and, knock off one of these big boys. If that game in Newport County, and that was in Newport County, and they had a lead early. They were putting up a fight there. Man, if they beat Manchester United in the FA Cup at home, that's kids. Grandparents are telling their kids about that for 60 years. That's what makes this tournament so great. So we got to facilitate more of those things. Now here's the last change, and this is the toughest change, but it's possibly the most important. They need to eliminate the Carabao Cup, the EFL Trophy tournament. It's redundant. It is second fiddle, even among domestic cups. England is the only European country that has 2 domestic cups. It does not need to exist. The reason this is tough, however, is the FA does not put on the Carabao Cup. The EFL does, the English Football League. And those two, of course, are not particularly friendly organizations. They have had their animosity. And so it's not just as simple as saying, well, just get rid of the Carabao Cup. None of this is all this simple to just wave a magic wand. This is what I would do if you could do that. But a lot of these other decisions are going to be up to the FA. Eliminating the Carabao Cup is not, so they're going to have to give the EFL something. Now, you have to recognize the situation here. The EFL knows the Carabao Cup is second fiddle. They know it is sort of dying. They know it is on its last legs. They know the big clubs don't take it seriously, which is why all of those previous statements are true. Most of the big clubs are using it to play their youngsters, some of their academy guys, or the first teamers who are young and don't get a lot of playing time. This is where the Carabao Cup shines. And I actually love that. about the Carabao Cup, which is why I think it's fun to watch, but that doesn't make it a very legitimate competition. And the club that wins the Carabao Cup is not necessarily the best club or even the one that played the best in the tournament. It's probably the one that uses the most of its regular players. And a lot of that can go down to squad depth and scheduling and again, luck of the draw. You get some easy draws. You get to play your backups more. There's just so much that goes into it that isn't about who the best team is. So the Carabao Cup really serves no purpose, but the EFL isn't just going to go away. So you got to do a couple things. First of all, you're going to have to bring the EFL in the loop on the FA Cup, right? The FA Cup is obviously run by the FA, but you're going to have to involve the little brother a little bit. So, make them a co-sponsor if that's a thing you can work out, or give them some sort of organizational authority over it. Bring the players, the guys that run the EFL into the mix, make them feel important, make them feel like they're a part of it, and they'll come along. They are looking for, they know their tournament's dying, and they're looking for a nice soft landing spot, so you've got to give them one. The other thing you have to do is you have to trickle down some revenue, more revenue, down to the smaller clubs. That's what the EFL is all about, is they've got to support these second, third, fourth, even fifth tier clubs. And the FA has an obligation there. It's something they should be doing more of. The Premier League needs to do more. The whole of England needs to do more, and in other countries too. This is not an English problem, but they need to do more to support these lower clubs. And so you may have to change the revenue split a little bit, but now you'll be the only show in town. The FA Cup will be the only domestic show in town, and that'll help with the TV revenue. That'll help with the stadium revenue. That'll help with the spotlight. So there is more money to be made for the FA Cup if they can eliminate their only real competition. You're just going to have to give that competition a little bit more money. So that's the trickiest part, but you got to remember, the head of the FA is Prince William. Throw some weight around, big guy. There is a way to make this happen. They just need to come to the table and work cordially together to do this, because not only are they eliminating the competition, but if you eliminate the Carabao Cup, you can move the FA Cup earlier in the season. And that's really important, because even though the FA Cup does kick off all the way in August when you get into the preliminary rounds and the really lower level teams getting in, you don't bring the big guys in till round 3, which comes in January. You could eliminate some of the schedule congestion, one, by eliminating the Carabao Cup games, and then two, by sliding the FA Cup games earlier into those Carabao Cup slots. So you can consolidate some of those early league games, the early round games, and then you bring the big guys in November or December and allow the tournament to get started and spread out a little bit more, and that would also aid in the schedule congestion. So that's the biggest hurdle, is eliminating the Carabao Cup, but I think it's one that needs to happen. I think it's one that is going to happen eventually anyway, so everyone would benefit if it's done properly and is done collectively in a way that benefits the tournament that's going to remain. So 5 changes I would make. Eliminate the Carabao Cup, eliminate the replays, eliminate the random draw and go with a seeding system, always play at the lower seeds home field, and add more substitutes, bigger benches for more player rotation in the tournament. Those 5 things are all doable and do not change the fundamental characteristics of what the FA Cup is and what has made it so great for so many years. I don't want to change the spirit of the tournament by any stretch. I think that's what makes it such a great tournament, but you've got to adjust it to fit with the times, to fit with the busy schedule, to fit with all the other competitions that are taking place throughout Europe and in England. And so I think some of these adjustments, minor as some of them may be, could go a long way towards not saving the FA Cup because it's not dying, but bringing it back to a point where it is almost on par with winning the Premier League. It is a consolation prize, but it is too much of a consolation at this point. There was a time when winning the FA Cup was almost as prestigious as winning the league itself. It's not going to pass the league, but I think we can get it back to a point where it is much less of a second fiddle. I would love your thoughts. I just threw a lot out there. I would love to hear what you think about it. Are any of these ideas just crazy? Am I missing something? Is there something preventing one of these changes from happening? Get in the comments section. Hit us up on Twitter at Pitchside Pub. Let us know. Make sure if you're listening on Spotify, you follow the podcast. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button for me. And I would love to get your thoughts on these changes in the FA Cup. Thanks as always for joining us on La Pausa at Pints and Punditry. This is the Pitchside Pub.